Charged Up Episode 7, Love and Money.
Are you ready to get charged up about your money, your credit, and your overall financial health? You've come to the right place. You're listening to Charged Up with Jenny Hoff.
Welcome to Charged Up. I'm Jenny Hoff. Romance is in the air this month, but if you want to keep the lovebirds singing, you'll need to make sure financial infidelity doesn't come in between you and your love. Today we're talking to CreditCards.com columnist, credit counselor, and author Erica Sandberg. You may have read her column Opening Credits or her book Expecting Money, the essential financial plan for new and growing families. She tells it like it is, and she's joining us today to talk about a trend we're seeing in the household, financial infidelity, and what you can do to avoid it. Let's get charged up about healthy financial relationships. Erica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Very happy to be here.
So this month, obviously with Valentine's Day, it's a month that we think about families. It's a month that we think about relationships. And hopefully all of those thoughts usually revolve around good things like romance and happiness. But there's also things that we should be talking about in relationships that aren't always happy, and they're issues that can arise and actually cause problem in relationships. And that is financial infidelity, which you've written about in a column, Opening Credits for CreditCards.com.
Yeah, that was a recent one, but it happens all the time. I mean, it is definitely an issue that comes up consistently, and it always has. You know, as long as people have been coupling up, we've had problems managing our personal finances when it comes to each other. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. And financial problems always makes the top 10 list of reasons why couples get divorced. Yet financial issues and credit scores don't usually make the list of topics to talk about before tying the knot. So we're going to get into financial fidelity and infidelity in a minute. But first, I want to ask you if you've ever had a moment, or perhaps a good friend did, where not really knowing about the finances of the partner put a huge strain on the relationship.
Sure, absolutely. It wasn't so much financial infidelity as this wanting to have full, complete, and total autonomy. Because we enter relationship as individuals, and we often do not want to reveal to our partner what we're spending our money on or what we want to spend our money on. And it just becomes this, well, why do I have to? This is my money. I'm making this money, and why can't I spend it the way I want to? And I distinctly remember my very first argument with my husband, and it was concerning something as minor as I wanted to get a mani-pedi. You know what? It was $30 at the most. And I remember kind of sitting there on the couch and talking to him and saying, kind of feel like getting it, but I'm not sure if I should. It just seems really like a big waste. But and I was vacillating. And he looked at me and he was like, "What are you talking about? Just go get the stupid mani-pedi." And it wasn't like he was being disrespectful. It was just like, why are you even talking about this? Just go do it. And I was thinking, yeah, why am I even talking about this? This is something that I certainly can go out and do without running it by him. And he's not going to run by every expense by me. And it just hit me like, this is ridiculous. There are certain things that we can do without having to even talk about them. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be communication. It was just a strange moment. Like, do I really have to? What's going on here? And it was minor.
It's an interesting dichotomy there, because on the one hand, you're saying you don't have to discuss every single purchase that you have with somebody. And yet with financial infidelity, part of that is stopping really discussing any purchases with your partner. And so it can go the other extreme, right? Where it gets to that danger zone where somebody is opening cards, somebody has store cards that they're hiding in the house, they're buying things, they're even using your credit to get new credit cards, and suddenly that trust is broken. Let's talk a little bit about financial infidelity. What is it, and what examples have you seen of it, and how common do you think it is?
Anytime you go behind somebody's back or somebody's doing it to you, to either spend with the credit cards, get into debt, use your personal finance resources, so it's your savings or your, what's the money that you have, and even in your wallet or his wallet or her wallet, and you don't tell them about it. That's cheating. It's just cheating, and don't do it. It's one of those things where if you feel like you're going to be embarrassed if you're found out, that's a good sign. There is something amiss. Or if somebody's doing it to you and they're using the credit card on something that you would not approve of and something that you would like to have your input about, that is cheating. It absolutely is. And it shouldn't happen because it betrays trust, it ruins trust, and it makes you feel completely sick about that person. Or if it happens, if you do it to the other person, you are not behaving in a way that's, I'll use this word, honorable. It's not honorable. It's absolutely disrespectful.
Yeah, I talked to a financial counselor once who I was interviewing for a story, and she mentioned this idea of financial intimacy, which is really the opposite of financial infidelity. And it's about an openness of being able to discuss finances and discuss financial issues. And I think a lot of times we can see in partnerships, especially if a child comes on board and one person decides to stay home, a shift happens where one person is really in charge of the finances, knows the budget, knows the bills, pays the bills, is in charge of all that. And the other person takes themselves a little bit out of the financial equation because they have other responsibilities now. And yet that can really leave you at a point of not knowing what's going on and not having knowledge. And your own credit can be affected when you are not really staying on top of the game about knowing finances. And I know that you also were a credit counselor and now you're a columnist and a writer and you speak all over the place about financial issues. Is that something that you saw in families a lot where this shift happened and suddenly one person didn't feel like they even had to talk to the other person about anything financial in the house?
All the time. Super common. As a matter of fact, one of the most typical circumstances about this would be if a person stops working because he or she is going to be taking care of the kid and the other person is controlling the purse strings and the credit strings. And you now have this shift of responsibility. Who's making the money? Who's paying the bills? Who is really responsible for the financial well-being of the family? So the person who is left without the means, without controlling the means, feels very vulnerable. And when that happens, all kinds of hell can break loose, and it happens really frequently because it's a very complicated emotional issue.
Some examples could be the other person opening store cards and not telling the spouse or the partner about that and hiding those store cards because there's shame involved if you're not necessarily the breadwinner in the family. And I feel like it could be a spiral into this nightmare situation where suddenly credits get shot and things are bought without the other person knowing, and budgets don't actually match up what's in the bank to what they think is on paper. And there's so many awful issues that can arise.
So true. It really is. And a lot of it has to do with when you're coupled up, you still want to remain in some way separate. That has to do with the way you spend and the way you charge. And so if you want to go and do something and the other person might not approve, might not be fully on board, you're going to do it anyway. And sometimes that can result in credit card debt that the other person might not want to be able to handle or have the means to handle. So you've got to communicate. It's so incredibly common that you go underground and then it all comes out and it can get ugly fast.
What would you say? Is financial infidelity just as damaging to a marriage or a relationship as romantic infidelity? Because in a sense, it's really just breaking the trust of somebody else. And so would taking out a card without letting your partner know and maxing it out or using their credit to buy something for yourself any better than having a secret romantic liaison?
Well, I think it depends on the couple. For me, it certainly would have a very similar impact, maybe not for somebody else. But in my experience, I have definitely seen it lead to separation, divorce, and even if it doesn't get to that point, extreme and crazy fights. So does it have the same impact as somebody having an affair? Maybe not so much, but it's close enough for it to be considered so bad where you really need to address this issue right away. And I remember this couple coming into my office way back when I was working for Consumer Credit Counseling Service. Young couple, they came into the office, and this guy visibly shrunk during the session as she was berating him for going behind her back and charging up the cards. And she laid into him so hard and heavy, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. I just let her vent. She just needed to yell. And it was quite a moment, and it really hit me. Wow, this is as bad as if he were to go and have an affair. It really felt that strong, that she was so tremendously hurt that he did it to her. And he was so embarrassed and so ashamed. It was really quite a moment, and it really hit me. It is bad. It's not something to be toyed with.
Right. And so let's get to some actionable items for people listening right now. That they're in a relationship, whether you're thinking about getting married or moving in together, or you've been together for a long time. What are some questions that people should ask each other before they get married or move in, or at least address now if they're already in that relationship?
Well, I love this because these can be really natural questions. It doesn't have to be like, okay, here we are, we're talking about what we're going to order for takeout. Oh, and now we have to talk about our finances. It's something that should be pretty seamless as you go along in your relationship, and you just start talking about attitudes. So, how do you feel about credit card debt? How do you feel about, have you ever had a credit card and you spent too much on it? Have you ever pulled your credit report? It's really crazy. I've got mine. It's something that shouldn't be done in a confrontational way. So some really common questions could be having to do with, say, even budgeting. Like, what do you think is a real indulgence? And that's a great way of opening up the line of questioning, because for me, a mani-pedi was indulgent. For my husband, he looked at me like, are you crazy? That's the simplest thing in the world. So it opened up an interesting discussion. So talk about what you like to spend your money on. What gives you the thrill? For me, a thrill to have my money to spend it on is a vacation. I love it. I want to talk about it. So start there. What's exciting? What makes you happy when it comes to spending your money?
Start there with the simple questions. And then, is that something that needs to get a little bit deeper, especially before, if you're thinking about getting married and you're moving in together, and if you're thinking of intertwining your finances? I feel like that needs to be a discussion that's real, that you guys check your credit, that you're on board. It's almost like talking about if you want to have children. You need to really clear the air of that without fear of it ruining the relationship, because otherwise you could be inheriting really an awful credit history and financial disaster.
Oh, absolutely. When it does become serious and you really think that you're going to be partnering up with somebody for good, without a doubt, you're going to have to talk about attitudes about and behavior about credit cards and saving and debt. A very big one, Jenny, is what you're comfortable with when it comes to debt. Now, what one person is at ease with, another person can feel sick about. I do tend to feel very sick when it comes to borrowing money at all, which is in a way kind of ridiculous, because you do need to, there's a certain amount of leverage that you get when you borrow. That's fine. But my husband has a lot more ease when it comes to charging on the credit cards. If he wants to buy a new TV or, maybe get a car or something, and he wants to get a loan, he's okay with it. But you have to talk about that. You have to talk about, where are you when it comes to comfortability? You just have to meet in the middle. You're going to have to. And if you don't, that is a sign that you are going to have conflict later, because it will. It absolutely will. And any other things, payment history. You and I both know how important it is to get your payments in on time. Well, not everybody's going to feel that way. Some people are going to be like, you pay when you can. Get this out now. So important. You may want to buy a house in the future together. You're going to want to get all that stuff together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that those are important conversations to have. The way we treat finances is often deep-seated emotional reaction we have inside of us. It's not something that's just so rational. So like you said, it can actually make you sick, the thought of taking out a lot of money. And it comes from an emotional place, partially probably from how you grew up, how money was presented to you, your own experiences in life, and your need for safety. So I agree. I think that's something that really people need to talk about. Okay, we asked those questions. So questions, how do you treat money? How do you feel about debt? How do you feel about credit card debt? How do you feel about loans? How do you spend your money? What would you splurge on? Okay, these are basic questions you can ask. What are some red flags people should be watching out for in answers?
Great question, Jenny. Major red flag is something that's so basic you may not even identify it, which is if you feel at all uncomfortable talking about money, big red flag. You need to have this sense of like, I feel good about this. I can talk about it. It's not going to be a problem. Both you and the other person needs to feel comfortable. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to be condemned for what you've done in the past. You've really got to feel like that it's a safe place and a safe person to discuss these. So a major red flag is if it's the opposite. If you feel like, I can't talk about this, that's a problem, because you're going to be together. You're going to be combining so much. Gauge yourself. Gauge how you feel about this. Absolutely. That's where you need to start.
Yeah. I think also a warning sign would be on a more superficial level, but not really, is what you like when you're dating, you might not like when you're married. So for instance, you like that somebody's kind of a big spender when you're dating. You go out to the nicest restaurants. He drives the nicest car, or she drives the nicest car. You take awesome trips. Everything just feels to be flowing towards you. Well, that could also indicate a spending problem. And once your finances are intertwined and you have a family, or you are now responsible equally for household chores and household finances, that might not be as an attractive a quality when you're trying to save money.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think it's also important to remember the only thing constant is change. You're going to change. Your attitudes are going to change. When you're young, let's just say that you are kind of in that dating realm and you're in your early 20s. Yeah, you may have a much more free-for-all attitude when it comes to money and spending and charging. That absolutely can do a flip around. Your attitudes can be completely the opposite. So expect it. Just think, okay, well, this is how I feel right now. In the future, things may change. And my partner may change too. He or she's, just because he or she is a spendthrift now, that won't always be the case. And kids, when they come into the picture, you change the way you deal with your finances dramatically. So expect that too.
And speaking of what to expect, I want to mention quickly your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you have a new version coming out.
The book is called Expecting Money, The Essential Financial Plan for New and Growing Families. One of the moments in your life that completely changes the way you deal with money is when you start thinking about having a child, and then when you do have a child, because your income is going to change, your priorities are going to change, and your partner, if you have a partner, is going to be impacted with all of this. So it's this, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now kind of thing. So I do address in the book these questions that you need to cover with your partner. One of them would be, hey, let's just talk about the lifestyle that we want to lead when we're new parents. Is it luxurious? Maybe we're leading this, kind of free, we're taking a lot of vacations and this type of thing. Do we want to continue that? If so, how are we going to manage it? Talk about college. Do you want to start planning for college for your child? Maybe not. Not everybody has that interest. So big questions really come into it. The same thing with income. There are some people out there who think they're going to be working throughout their parenthood. Others, the moment they get pregnant, they're like, I'm out of here. So talk about this. It is going to have a huge impact on your personal finances.
I would definitely even recommend plotting out a budget of what it's going to be like once a child is there, and if you go to a single income household, and starting to live that out months before the baby actually arrives. So you are on track, you know what your spending is, you know what your new budget is, you get used to not buying every single thing that you see and that you might want because you know that that's not within your budget. It's the worst time to have more strains in the relationship financially because there's going to be a lot of strain with a baby crying all night, etc. So I think that you're exactly right. You need to be having those conversations. You need to be planning your budget. You need to be really watching out and making sure that you guys are being honest and upfront with each other.
And to tie it into financial infidelity, that also can be a trigger for that to happen, because if your income, your combined income has shrunk dramatically, you can resist that need to budget. And if you're resisting it, it could turn you into this, like, well, I'm not going to do it. I still have the credit cards and I can still charge. You could go behind your partner's back and continue to spend as you had been with a lot less money coming in. So this can be the time that causes you or your partner to do some not so great things with your money. So focus on what each other is doing, what you are doing and what he or she is doing too, because this could be the point that things can change dramatically.
Talking about how relationships, one person can stop working and one person does go to work and now they probably have a child on the scene. Is it a problem when only one person in the relationship manages the finances? Or does it work better that way if one person just stays on the budget? And do you see most problems arise when one person doesn't really have a grasp on the family budget?
Without a doubt, if you feel like you are lost, you're not the one who's controlling anything when it comes to the family finances, you're just at a loss. You are not in control. You need to be. Even if you're not the one earning, be aware. Please know account numbers. Know how much debt you may have from month to month. Understand what your credit score is. Get in there. This is your responsibility as an adult. Don't abdicate. I think that's my number one message. If you let it slide for a little bit, you could always jump back in. Don't be afraid. This is not something that you can afford to move away from for too long. For a little bit, sure. But this is your right and responsibility as an adult human being.
While we don't want to talk about bad things that could happen, divorce is a reality. Separation is a reality. God forbid that happens and you don't have any idea what the finances are, what your credit score is, how the family budget has been split up, where the money belongs. I think that could end up in really hurting you as a person and if you have children as a parent, because suddenly you're having to almost start over.
Oh, absolutely. People are shocked when they start to separate because things didn't work out. Then they start taking a look at what really has been going on financially. And overwhelmingly, it is a nasty shock to the system to see what's been going on. Accounts have been depleted. Credit card bills have been run up. There's been collection activity. It's so common, and you can absolutely avoid it by being on top of it. Being on top of it all the time, as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and if you're usually the savior in the relationship, the hero who brings home the money, manages the finances, sometimes that can feel embarrassing if you've run into some financial trouble, and you might not share it with your partner because you may not want to be diminished in their eyes a little bit, and you just think, I'll take care of it myself. But again, as we were talking about financial infidelity, that can spiral into something where you've broken now the trust with that person, and you've hurt that person in the process as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, it is hurtful. This isn't something that is a light, little minor problem. Going behind somebody's back and doing something when it's going to impact their finances, not just yours, but theirs, it's a mean-spirited thing to do, and you may not recognize it as you're doing it. So think about it. You know, this is, when you're together. Now, there are some techniques that you can have where you're not as together as you may want to. And in the column that you addressed in the beginning, I suggested a post-nup. You can even start to divide your finances while you're still married. But overall, just approach it. When it comes to your money, when you're in a couple situation, be kind to each other.
I want to go back to questions that you should be asking. And maybe as an actionable item for listeners, what are 5 questions that you should ask your partner or your potential spouse, 5 questions that you can ask about finances and money attitudes in order to help safeguard that relationship and also your own credit?
Oh, sure. The first question would be, how do you feel about credit cards? Just give me some ideas. Like, do you have credit cards? Do you have any current debt? Tell me about it. You know, that would be something I would be very interested in as a partner. The second one is, and this is, of course, if you're really starting to get serious about partnering up, would be, hey, are you willing to share your credit report with me? Let's go through it. You know, I'd really like to see it, because when we do get married or become very serious when it comes to combining our finances, it's going to be relevant. So are you willing to do that? So those are the 2 credit and debt questions I would have. But another one would be, have you ever done anything financially that you regret? Great question to open up, because now comes trust. You know, can you trust me to tell me about these things? Can I trust you to tell you about these things? See how you are with that. Those are kind of exciting moments. Like, okay, I'm going to reveal. Now it's time for you to reveal. And that's really nice. Number 4 would be, let's talk about budgets. How do you feel about it? Where do you love to splurge? Where do you love to save? Tell me about this. You know, and go over where the line item fit, and, you know, you each do it to each other. And that's really nice thing to do. And then talk about savings. Where do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to lead? And how are you going to make that happen when it comes to savings?
I think those are 5 great questions. And I think if everybody just asks these questions before they tie the knot, before they move in together, and settle out whatever differences they may have and have those discussions and know if they're really compatible, there could be a lot more easy transitions into marriage and throughout partnership, because money is a big issue. Finances are a big issue. Your credit matters. The credit of your partner matters. And your attitudes towards money and savings matter, especially when you're going to have to start planning for retirement, college education for your children, buying a house, medical bills, all of the things that come with the beauty of life. My final question is, so what would you say a healthy relationship looks like when it comes to financial issues?
I would say that you can open up about your financial hopes and fears in a way that makes you feel good. You feel that you can be candid, and the other person can be candid with you. That that is health. That is something that is going to carry you through your relationship. It's that moment that you feel you can't, or the other person feels that they can't, that trouble starts to brew. So as long as you feel comfortable with that, you're in a good place.
Wonderful. And finally, our show is Charged Up. And I want to ask you, what gets you charged up about financial health and mastering the art of money?
I have to say, I noticed that as we've been talking, I've had a big smile on my face the entire time. So, and it's because money and credit and anything having to do with personal finance, it's a fun subject. So what gets me charged up is just simply the fact is what we earn, what we charge, how we deal with all of these things. It's a way to get what you want out of life, to enjoy life. So it gets me charged up because I know that, hey, I've got a vacation coming up in the summer and it's something that I have to finance. So that gets me charged up. It's the idea that I'm going to get something and get something great and feel good.
Absolutely. Erica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of Charged Up. If you have questions that you want us to answer on air, please send me an email at chargedup@CreditCards.com. I'll do my very best to get them answered. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes. Until next time, get charged up about your financial future.